Welcome back, everyone. So the Pentagon just completely pulled back the curtain on this massive, newly declassified cache of files dealing with UFOs, or, as the military prefers to call them now, unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAPs. In today's explainer, we're going to unpack all of this together. We're looking at the raw data, the eyewitness accounts, and some really wild military footage. So let's jump right in.
Okay, let's dive into this. Listen to this quote. It honestly sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie script, right? But it's not. This is the actual unedited transcript of Apollo 17 astronaut Jack Schmitt speaking from space during his 1972 moon landing mission. I mean, when you have these highly trained, deeply serious observers looking out the window of their spacecraft and describing the dark void of space like a fireworks display, you just know we're dealing with a really compelling piece of history.
And honestly, Schmidt's account is just a single drop in a very large bucket here. Today, we're looking at a staggering release of 161 individual files. And these were declassified and posted online at the direct order of former U.S. President Donald Trump. To be clear, this is definitely not a leak. This is a fully authorized official government release.
And this brilliantly illustrates the true scope of what the Pentagon just handed us. You see, this data doesn't just cover one specific, isolated event. We're tracking a phenomenon that spans well over 6 decades. It goes from a civilian FBI report way back in 1957, right through the golden age of the Apollo missions, and lands squarely in our modern era with military encounters from just 2022 and 2023.
But before we look at the specific sightings themselves, we kind of have to understand why this is happening right now. Over the last few years, there's been this massive public and political push for transparency. Back in 2022, Congress actually held its first hearings on UFOs in half a century. And the momentum really accelerated when former President Barack Obama stated that while aliens are statistically a possibility, he personally saw no evidence of them while in office. So it's really this mix of high-level commentary and intense congressional pressure that created the perfect storm to unseal these 161 documents.
Section 1. Space Witnesses, Astronaut Encounters. Let's start by looking at what was seen from the vastness of space.
These documents take us all the way back to 1965, specifically to the Gemini 7 spaceflight. And what is just absolutely incredible about this file is that we aren't just reading some dry, written summary. The release actually includes details of the raw audio recordings of astronaut Frank Borman communicating directly with NASA ground support. Just imagine being in mission control and hearing a highly experienced pilot radio in something he simply cannot identify.
His phrasing here is incredibly vivid. Borman described seeing a bogey, which is a military term for an unidentified aircraft, and he said it was accompanied by trillions of little particles positioned just to the left of his spaceship. It's wild. You can really picture the sheer density and just the bizarre nature of the anomaly Borman was witnessing right through the glass of his capsule.
Let's move to Hallen and see how this builds with another highly credible witness. Jumping forward 4 years to 1969, we have a newly published interview with the legendary Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin. This is a man whose observational skills and scientific background are practically unmatched.
Just look at how carefully Aldrin tries to categorize what he's seeing. He says, "I observed what appeared to be a fairly bright light source, which we tentatively ascribed to a possible laser." Even as a top-tier astronaut, he's clearly struggling to identify the phenomenon, tentatively guessing it might just be a laser. It perfectly highlights that razor-thin boundary between known science and the completely unknown.
And the rhythm of these encounters continues almost immediately with the very next lunar mission. This release includes actual transcripts from Apollo 12, featuring astronaut Alan Bean during his literal moonwalk in 1969.
Bean describes seeing particles and flashes of lights sailing off in space, escaping the moon. Notice how perfectly this aligns with Jack Schmitt's 4th of July description we talked about earlier. It's almost ironic, right? These astronauts were sent all the way up there to look for moon rocks, and instead they're logging these massive light shows. Now, while the astronauts themselves hypothesized these flashes might simply be reflections off pieces of ice, the sheer volume of these visual anomalies really shows just how wild and confusing the environment of space was for these early pioneers.
Section 2. Earthbound Observers, Civilians and the Military. Let's guide our focus back down into the atmosphere.
So, the crucial point is how consistent the awe and confusion are, even when they're separated by almost 70 years. For instance, in 1957, a man told the FBI about a massive circular vehicle rising from the ground.
Then, you fast forward to late 2023, and U.S. citizens are reporting hovering metal objects literally materializing out of bright lights. We're looking at wildly different eras, yet the striking, almost imaginative descriptions of these encounters remain remarkably similar.
But listen, this document dump isn't just decades-old transcripts and civilian interviews. It brings us right to the cutting edge of modern military intelligence. The files actually include video clips taken by the U.S. military in the Middle East dating from 2022. We're talking about footage captured in places like Iraq, Syria, and the United Arab Emirates using highly advanced sensors and military targeting pods.
Let's break down the facts here so you know exactly what the government caught on video. The Pentagon explicitly classifies this footage as an unresolved, unidentified, anomalous phenomenon. One specific clip shows an oval-shaped object streaking rapidly across a Middle Eastern location from left to right. And interestingly enough, the military report flags it as a possible missile, which really highlights the immediate real-world security concerns these encounters create for our troops on the ground. Section 3. Congress reacts. Transparency versus distraction. Now let's see how lawmakers are sharply divided on this.
On one side, you have the pro-transparency viewpoint. Representative Anna Paulina Luna, along with colleagues like Representative Tim Burchett, view this release factually as a great start. For the lawmakers who've been fighting for years to get the Department of Defense to open its books, these 161 files are exactly what they've been asking for. They see it as a massive first step toward genuine government accountability regarding UAPs.
But we absolutely have to balance that with the highly skeptical viewpoint. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene represents a vocal faction that views this entire release neutrally as a calculated distraction. For these lawmakers, dropping a massive cache of UFO files is simply shiny object propaganda. They argue it's designed to pull the public's attention away from far more pressing, immediate issues, like economic affordability and the war in Iran.
Now, what's really interesting here is the ultimate question it leaves us with. We've mapped out the timeline, we've read the awestruck transcripts from astronauts, and we've examined the raw military data. But are these 161 files the definitive answers the public has been demanding for decades? Or has the Pentagon simply opened the door to a much, much larger mystery? Well, that is something you're going to have to decide for yourself. Thank you so much for joining me for today's Explainer. Keep learning and keep asking questions.